Hey, story fans, it's your old pal, the Writing Ref. I don't hate, I just officiate your favorite video game stories. That's right, we haven't talked about a video game in a while, and I thought instead of talking about just one, Star Wars Outlaws, I thought we'd talk about the writer of that game and two others, Red Dead Redemption 2, and the Horizon series, Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West. And the reason why I want to do that is I want to take a look at the do's and don'ts of writing side quests and call some penalties, of course. So let's go ahead and do that right now.
Why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name.
That's a lot of fish.
What kind of person ends up being a writer for video games? We know screenwriters toil with their dreams and try to go to Hollywood and get their scripts noticed. We know novelists like me query agents or use the self-publishing route and do all sorts of things. We know how comic book writers start to write graphic novels. But what kind of people get to write video games? Well, it turns out all of the above. For instance, Navid Kavari, who's the head story director for Star Wars Outlaws, was also a writer on the Far Cry series and The Division and Splinter Cell, if you can imagine, because Star Wars Outlaws is very much a stealth game. But he got his start on a interactive motion comic from 2010 to 2011 called Lost Girl. If you haven't seen a motion comic before, you should check them out. They're a very cool art form for storytelling. Ben McCaw, who some may know as the writer for the Horizon series, Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West, got his start a completely different way. He was a screenwriter, and instead of ending up turning in a script and writing for movies, he found his way writing for a video game. And I also want to recognize Horizon Forbidden West's other main writer, Annie Contain, who got her start after writing role-playing games with two different companies. She's responsible for a lot of the side quests that got written. And finally, we have Dan Houser. The way that this fellow became a video game writer and story writer for the Red Dead Redemption series is by starting his own video game company, Rockstar Games. Eventually, when you know how to program and produce and make video games, you also get to be the writer on several more video games. So starting with the Grand Theft Auto series and Max Payne, eventually he was executive producer and lead writer on the Red Dead Redemption series. So no writer is without mistakes, and I don't want to focus on their overall story this time and talk about the do's and don'ts of side quests. Side quest penalty number 1. Story has too many fetch quests. Fetch quest. Subscribe if you like cats. Anyway, some example stories that have too many fetch quests. The Rise of Skywalker is a very good fetch quest heavy story with unnecessary steps to get from one place to another. Always remember the notorious stand exactly on the beach with no consideration of erosion or how much the Death Star might have sunk or anything like that. In your stories, when you're writing, if you're a novelist, if you're writing all about the car trip from one place to another and nothing's happening, you might be boring your audience. This same effect happens with the same type of quest over and over in video games, especially if they don't inform the story. A classic example of a game with poor fetch quests and the same quest over and over that don't really have a compelling story to them is the most recent Final Fantasy XV. Now, all three of the writers I mentioned had fetch quests in their open world games. Horizon Forbidden West, Star Wars Outlaws, and Red Dead Redemption 2 all have pretty fetchy quests, where you're basically going and getting something and bringing it back, or going and finding something and then you're done. Horizon Forbidden West does this in one of the best ways by taking fetched quests and labeling them as errands. So every time you're on an errand, you know that it's going to be some kind of fetch quest. That doesn't mean that it's going to get boring though, as there's all kinds of variety in what you have to accomplish and what you might have to fight to complete the mission. So as a storyteller, if you're going to send your characters on a side MacGuffin quest, you should declare them by mission type, and maybe they have more than one option on this side journey to get something they need to do better on the main journey. And then finally, you should make sure that it's well integrated into the story. Penalty number 2 on video game side quests. Sidequest was not integral to the story. So when you're not doing something that's integral to the story, or makes your character feel like they just did a whole bunch of stuff and nothing got progressed because you're right back where you started, that's either detrimental to the story or not as good as doing something that progresses the story. One of the best examples of progressing the story with a side quest comes in Star Wars Outlaws. In fact, I think a lot of the reviews for this game are a bit unfair because people rushed through the main story and didn't play side quests, which were so integral to the characterization of certain characters that they were missing a bunch of context to putting together the group for the heist. For example, in Outlaws, there's a quest where you run into another commando droid, like ND5, who's stuck under some rubble. And after finishing the quest, instead of just opening up some new things, which does happen, we learned so much about ND5 because this was ND5's old unit. And we understand that some of these droids had enough sentience that they weren't very unlike the clones. And you really start to feel it if you are a fan of the Clone Wars and how these machines and men were, with sentience, were both used for an evil purpose. Now, can you get through the story and still have a good time, and it's still a pretty good story without that moment and a bunch of others like it? Sure you can. But I think gaming writers are starting to realize that the core story can be kind of short and plot intensive. All the character details and things that you would get on background information in a book or a novel, and even some of those internal thoughts that don't come across in any other media, even TV shows or comics, you can really enhance a story with the side quest in a video game. And the final side quest penalty we're going to cover in this video. Side quest breaks suspension of disbelief and feels contrived. Now, I've had videos on entire stories feeling contrived before, but there's even more of a danger when you want your story to go off on a tangent and then return. Aloy, who lives in an apocalyptic future, isn't going to pursue a side quest to assassinate a member of her own tribe at random. And in Red Dead Redemption 2, we have hunting and fishing side quests, and you can do all sorts of crazy things, but it would be out of character for our main hero in Red Dead Redemption 2 to suddenly go snowboarding. Unless... And finally, in Star Wars Outlaws, it would feel out of place to suddenly have a side quest given to you by a surviving Jedi or something like that. Something that breaks the flow of the story. So, in all of these games, they do a really good job of making the side quest feel in character and something that would interest the player, as opposed to the number one goal of any writing: don't bore your reader and don't confuse them. Don't bore your gamer and don't confuse your gamer. Keep the story going. And there you have it, writing fans and story fans. What do all these penalties have in common? A side quest should enhance the story and not take you out of it. Until next time, I've been the Writing Ref, and that's been The Call.